They warned them, in writing, with a timestamp, and the Americans did it anyway. 3 seconds of silence. 150 men walked into that valley. Beat. None of them came back. Staff Sergeant Daniel Rourke had been in 11 combat insertions before that night. He knew what the air felt like when something was wrong. It felt like this. The valley floor was cold in the way that cold has nothing to do with temperature. It was the cold of a place that had swallowed sound whole, where even the wind seemed to move carefully, as if afraid of disturbing something sleeping beneath the rock. Rourke kept his breathing controlled, 3 counts in, 3 counts out, the way they had drilled it 600 times in a facility that didn't appear on any base registry. His rifle was up. His eyes were scanning. His boots moved across the loose shale with the practiced silence of a man who had spent 3 years learning to become invisible. Behind him, in a column that stretched 40 meters back into the darkness, moved the other 149. No one spoke. That was protocol. But protocol wasn't why no one spoke. No one spoke because every single man in that valley felt it. It started with a single encrypted message, not a press briefing, not a diplomatic cable passed through the usual channels, a direct transmission, routed through the kind of infrastructure that only exists when someone needs the conversation to disappear afterwards. The timestamp read, so 3:47 a.m. local time. Jerusalem was still asleep. At the other end of that transmission sat Colonel Ethan Raz, a man who had spent 22 years inside the Israeli Defense Forces doing the kind of work that doesn't appear on any official record. He wasn't panicking. Ethan Raz didn't panic. But the people who knew him best, the handful who had watched him operate across 3 decades of shadow conflicts, would later say they had never seen him type so fast. The message was 4 words long. "Do not send them." Rourke stopped. He raised a closed fist. The column behind him froze, a single organism responding to a single nerve signal. 149 men becoming statues in the darkness. No sound, no movement. 40 meters of controlled tension drawn tight as a wire. He had heard something, not a shot, not a voice, not the metallic click that every soldier learns to identify before they identify anything else. Something subtler. A displacement of air, a shift in weight on rock somewhere above and to the left, on the ridgeline that his night vision outlined in green-grey shadow. He held position for 11 seconds. Nothing moved. He signaled advance. They moved. In a glass-walled situation room somewhere inside a non-disclosed location in Northern Virginia, a CIA liaison named Marcus Webb was sipping his 3rd coffee of the night when the message came through. Marcus had been in the intelligence business long enough to develop a very specific kind of instinct, the kind that whispers danger before your brain even registers the threat. He read the message. He read it again. Then he looked across the room at the man who had final operational authority over what was about to happen. A man whose name you will never find in a congressional hearing. A man the internal directories listed only by a single letter. D. "We have a problem," Marcus said. D didn't look up from his screen. "We have a timeline. Raz is flagging this." Raz flags everything. Not like this. At the midpoint of the valley, the terrain narrowed. Rourke had studied the topography map for 6 hours before insertion. He knew the narrowing was coming. A natural choke point where the valley walls pressed inward to roughly 18 meters of passable ground. Enough for a column to move through, not enough for a column to maneuver once it was inside. Standard doctrine said you sent a scout element ahead, cleared the high ground on both sides before committing the main body. Standard doctrine assumed the mission had time. This mission had a timeline. He moved through the narrowing with his team lead, Sergeant First Class Calvin Price, 3 steps behind his left shoulder. Price had done 2 tours in Mosul and 1 in Syria. Price had a wife named Angela and a daughter named Mia, who was 4 years old and had learned to say Daddy in a video that Price had watched on his phone approximately 200 times. Price tapped Rourke's shoulder. 2 fingers, ridge line, left. Rourke looked up. On the ridge, against the sky that was beginning to show the first grey suggestion of pre-dawn, a shape moved. Then another, then another. Then the ridge was lined with them. What Marcus Webb understood, and what Dee was choosing to ignore, was that Colonel Ethan Raz had been inside that valley. Not on a map, not on a satellite image, physically. 3 years prior, during an operation that officially never occurred, Raz had moved through that terrain with a 6-man unit. They had studied its walls, its echo patterns, its sight lines. They had memorized every choke point and every exit, and Raz had come out of that valley understanding something that no aerial reconnaissance drone could communicate. That place was designed to be entered and never left. It was a kill box. The geography made it one, the geology completed it. And the people who controlled the high ground above it, the network of operatives loyal to the most powerful clerical figure in the region, had turned it into a textbook ambush corridor so perfect it almost seemed invited. The 150 men being sent in that night were among the most elite special operations forces on the planet. They were also, according to Ethan Raz's transmission, already dead. They just didn't know it yet. "Contact," Rourke said into his comms. His voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a man suppressing every biological response his body was trying to have. "Contact. High ground. Left ridge. Multiple." The first shot ended the sentence. It didn't come from the left ridge, it came from the right. And then the left ridge opened up simultaneously, and Rourke understood in a single cascading second what had taken intelligence analysts months to miss. They hadn't walked into an ambush. They had walked into a closing door, both ridges, both walls. Every exit point accounted for, every angle of fire pre-calculated, every position already ranged and ready before the first boot had touched the valley floor. "Break contact!" Price was shouting now, all pretense of silence gone, his voice cutting through the percussion of fire that was beginning to build from above like thunder before a storm collapses. "Break left! Break left!" Rourke was already moving. Behind him, the column was fragmenting, teams peeling into prepared formations the way years of training demand the body move when the mind hasn't caught up yet. Men were returning fire, muzzle flashes strobing green-white through night vision. The valley walls throwing sound back at them in waves so that it became impossible to distinguish incoming from outgoing, friendly from hostile, the living from what they were about to become. Rourke reached a boulder and pressed himself flat against it. He did a count, 4 men around him, 4 out of 150. He keyed his comms, static. He tried again, static. The jammers had activated. In Northern Virginia, Marcus Webb watched the GPS signals begin to disappear. Not all at once, one by one, cluster by cluster, like lights being turned off in a building by someone who knew exactly where every switch was located. The first cluster went dark at 04:31 a.m., Rourke's element, the forward team, the point of the spear. The second cluster at 04:36 a.m., the third at 04:40 a.m., the fourth, fifth, and sixth in rapid succession between 04:44 and 04:47 a.m. "Log it," Dee said finally. His voice had not changed. Marcus Webb looked at him. "Log it," Dee said again. "Timestamp it, we proceed on schedule." Webb logged it. He also, without authorization, took a photograph of his own screen with a personal device. He would never fully explain why, only that something in him needed a record to exist somewhere outside the building. Rourke's 4 men held behind the boulder for 6 minutes. He knew it was 6 minutes because he counted every second. That is what training does. It doesn't stop fear. It doesn't stop the hands from shaking or the heart from trying to exit the chest. It gives the mind something to do while the body is coming apart. He counted. He breathed. He listened to the fire above them begin to shift, to organize, to move with the patience of people who had nowhere else to be and all night to be patient in. Price was gone. Rourke had seen him go down at the second burst, 40 meters back in the valley, in the exact spot where the terrain had narrowed, and there had been nowhere to run and nowhere to cover and nowhere to be except exactly where Price had been. Price, who had a wife named Angela. Price, who had a daughter named Mia. Price, who had watched a video of his 4-year-old daughter saying "Daddy" approximately 200 times. Rourke pressed his back harder against the boulder. Above him, through the rock and the noise and the dark, he could hear movement on the high ground. Methodical, unhurried, the movement of people working through a list. He tried his comms one more time. Static. At 04:49 a.m., the last GPS signal in Northern Virginia went dark. The official account, when it eventually surfaced, not through any press release, but through a single document leaked to a journalist in a capital city that preferred not to be named, described the operation as an intelligence synchronization failure. 4 words: clean, clinical, bureaucratic. Those 4 words covered the last 6 minutes behind a boulder in a valley where the walls were made of stone and the silences between shots stretched long enough for a man to think about everything he had not said and everyone he would not see again. What the report did not say, it did not say the warning had been received. It did not say the warning had been time-stamped, logged, and overridden. It did not say that 8 months later a journalist received an envelope containing a photograph, a clear image of a screen showing a 4-word message from a colonel named Raz, time-stamped 03:47 a.m., marked, received, and logged, with a single handwritten annotation in the margin. Proceed on schedule. Colonel Ethan Raz retired from active service 11 months after the valley went silent. He has never given a public interview. Marcus Webb resigned his position 8 months later, citing personal reasons. D remains in his position. The official inquiry concluded that the operation represented a failure of multi-agency communication protocols and recommended a comprehensive review of synchronization procedures. The valley still exists. The silence above it has never been explained. And somewhere, in a filing system that most people will never know exists, there is a timestamp from 03:47 a.m., proof that the warning arrived, proof that it was read, and proof that someone wrote 3 words in the margin that decided the fate of 150 men. Proceed on schedule. Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't the enemy on the ridge, it's the man in the room who already knows you're not coming back.